Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how I made Camilla's gauntlets and armbands. And this is probably my favorite instance of we're Fire Emblem, we don't care about consistency, and good luck with cosplaying that. So I'm going to show you guys which primary reference photo I use to base off of my cosplay, because one picture will contradict another depending on what angle it is, so there's no winning with these. So I'm actually going to start off with the armbands because those were pretty quick. For the upper armband, I just put some plastic wrap and then masking tape around my arm to get a nice size fit. And then based on my reference photos, it looked like it was skinnier towards the inner arm and then wider on the outside of the arm. And I chose to go off of this reference photo, which basically showed that there was a slight curve right at the bottom where it kind of meets up with the other armband. So I really liked the way that that looked, so I decided to throw that curve in on my own too. I initially cut it in a thicker floor mat foam, but then I later changed it to a skinnier foam, a 6mm, which made it a lot easier to slide on my arm. So that's what I would recommend using for this. I'm just gonna set that to the side until later. And then for the horned armband, I did a similar masking tape method to make the pattern. And this armband is a lot thinner than the upper armband, but it also does have a wide base on the outside because we're gonna attach a pad onto it later on that our claws are gonna sit on. Then I drew a line down the middle so we could cut these as separate pieces and then glue them together back at an angle so that we can kind of get that angled look that these are seeming to have in the reference photos. So when you're cutting these out, be sure to angle your blade away from the outline. That's going to give us a bottom bevel on both of the pieces, so when we glue them back together, they're going to give us that nice angle that we're looking for. And I also put that slight little curve into the top of this horned armband so that when it sits underneath the upper armband, it gives that nice little gap that the primary reference photo that I was using was showing. And then to make the pad that the claws are going to sit on, all of the reference photos kind of show a different look for this pad. So the one that's of a full body of Camilla is more rounded at the top and it has like a little nub at the bottom. And then the one that's a closer close-up of Camilla, it looks more like a wider diamond. So I decided to go more for that sort of look. And then to give that claw pad itself some more dimension, I just cut a slit across almost the center, more low center. And then I glued them back together at a bevel, almost the way that we did with that armband, but a little bit less dramatic. So that way it looks like it kind of curves to protect your elbow. So the horns are another one of those creative choices you have to make based off of the reference photos. In one picture, they look like straight up bear claws. Like they're straight, they're long, and they look good. But in another reference photo, they look hooked. They looked more like lizard-like, I guess more dragon-like. And that's the one that I ended up going with. Primarily because it kind of emulated the hip claws, like that kind of like hooked curved look, and I felt like if I did the straight up and down ones, it just wouldn't be consistent, but you do you, pick what you want. And then to make the horns themselves, I just got some pink insulation foam. You can buy this at most hardware stores for pretty cheap. You can get it in small sheets. I believe the thickness I got was no more than 1.5 inches. It might have been a little bit less than that actually. And then I just drew out what I thought that the claw would look like, slowly cut away sections. And then I used something called a rasp, which is just kind of like a shaver tool, and I just cut away those big sections to kind of flesh out this horn shape. And the rasp will give you that shape that you're looking for, but it won't be a smooth finish, so you can go back in with some sandpaper and then smooth that out. There's some trial and error with these. There's a lot of learning curves when it comes to working with insulation foam, but it gives you a really nice result at the end. And also be sure to seal the horns once you're done with them, and I sealed mine with wood glue. And then once you're finished with your horns, you can trace them around the claw pad right where you're going to want them to be and use a Dremel to kind of sand down that area so they look like they're nice and set in there. And then we're just going to put that to the side until later and move on to the gauntlets for right now. So you know the routine, wrap your arm in saran wrap and then put masking tape over it. Draw a line down the center so you have a central point to go off of, and then just start patterning out each of those little layers that's going to make up the gauntlet. As you can see, I had a lot of different overlapping lines, and it was hard to make sense of which were the ones that I wanted to use and which ones weren't. So at this point, I just decided to transfer it to paper to see if I was liking how it was looking. Be sure to number your layers so you remember what order everything goes in. Missing someone is as normal. Missing someone and missing someone is as normal. Missing someone. And then from that point, it made it easier to see how I wanted my final product to look, so I went back to my masking tape pattern and started adding more layers. Missing someone. Missing someone. It was so important to me that this was functional. Obviously, it's designed in a way that when she bends her wrists, it'll move with it. It's not just a stiff piece that, you know, is kind of stuck there. So I had to figure out a way to make it kind of fan out like that. So I used these brass fasteners, which are basically like these little metal pins that you can push through something, and then you can open them up once you've pushed it through, and it'll hold something together. And lucky for us, Camilla has the exact same thing. She has these little metal pins that hold everything together and allow it to hinge. So I tried that out with my paper pattern to make sure that it would work, and it did. So I've seen this done a lot of different ways, but from what I can make sense out of the pictures was that there's a base part of the gauntlet that is the longest piece up her forearm, and then there's another piece sitting on top that kind of juts out, and it's just, that's the really defining part of her gauntlet, is like that silhouette of it. And where this can go wrong is that that layer needs to kind of hover out above the bottom layer, but if you go too far, it can just look like you have like Popeye arms, and that is not what we're going for here. You know, it's like a feminine, demure armor. So like, it was so important to me that I got that to lay right, and it didn't look like I just had, you know, like triangles just kind of like sitting on my arms. I would highly recommend making a mock-up of the gauntlets out of foam, because this is such a functional piece. It's really hard to figure out where all the lines are going to meet up in the middle when you're drawing all these different separate layers. Even though the paper pattern fit perfectly around my arm, once I transferred it to foam, there was a huge gap down the middle of my arm. It didn't fit all the way around. And I think that has something to do with the thickness of the foam versus the thickness of the paper. So I was actually really glad that I tried it out first, not only to see if it was functional, but then just to repattern and make everything fit all much better. stop right there real quick. I don't know why I originally drew this top layer as going in the opposite direction of all the other layers, but just so you know, I eventually changed it so that it goes in the same direction as everything else. Just so no one's confused. Okay, go ahead. I decided to make my gauntlets out of 4mm EVA foam, and the reason for that is because I want it to be flexible. I want it to look feminine, but I still want it to look sturdy. So something like 2mm would be too flimsy, and something any thicker than 4mm would probably make your arms look too bulky. So I thought that 4mm, just like with the bodice, was perfect. Alright, this is where I'm like kind of stupid. I wouldn't recommend putting the brass fasteners through the pattern pieces and then putting the heat gun on them like I'm doing here. I definitely think it's a good idea to push the holes through so you know where that's going to line up, but individually heating them up and then curving them, then putting the brass fasteners through would be a lot safer than what I did, because putting a heat gun onto something metal, like, I was being very careful, but I do not recommend doing that. So I would individually heat up each piece and then curve it around. I don't recommend putting the pins through and then heating up the pins, because that was a dumb thing by me. And then on the upper armband and then the largest layers of the gauntlets, there's some little gold trim pieces. So for that I just cut a bunch of little strips of 2mm craft foam and I painted them all gold. So let's get into painting and assembling. I use Flexi Dip to seal in everything. You can use Plasti Dip, whatever you need to seal in your armor. And then although my foam was already black, I just sprayed it with a black spray paint just so it gives that shiny armor look to it. And then spray your trim pieces and your horns gold. And then take your time putting everything together. And then once all your pieces are dry, then you can put everything back together with the brass fasteners. And then the only pieces that are actually glued together are these two layers, because this very top layer is going to hold everything in together. And then the very top layer that's going to jut out, that's actually glued on. And then to make sure that this very top layer would stay hovering away from my arm and not, move in and out, I just put a tiny little piece of 2mm foam so that it couldn't completely ever become flushed with the rest of everything else. Because the gauntlets are made out of all these individual articulating layers, I wasn't going to be able to make it, one uniform piece glued in the middle so I could just slip them on. That wasn't going to work for me, so I ended up just putting in a zipper. Not for functional purposes, but I guess I thought it looked more cohesive with the design, so that if somebody saw the inside of my arm, it wouldn't just look like, strips of something are holding everything together. It looked just more smooth. And then I just sewed some fabric to each side of the zipper, and then I coated it in contact cement, and then I glued it in onto the inside of each side of the gauntlet. And that is it for this tutorial. Alright, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or suggestions for other videos. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to tag me on Instagram if you ever use one of my tutorials to make something. And I also have a question for you guys. What kind of content would you want to see on this channel? Do you want to see more tutorials? Do you want to see videos from going to conventions? Because sometimes I'll occasionally film video there. Do you want to see, you know, more of like short videos that are kind of featuring a whole cosplay, like just videos dedicated to a cosplay? Do you want to see stuff that me and my friends do? Let me know in the comments below because I would love to put out more videos for you guys. I just don't know what people are interested in watching. I'm going to include some clips in the end card of just some footage that I've taken at conventions, and let me know if that's kind of the videos that you guys would be interested in. I'd really like to be posting more. I'm not sure what people want to see. Alright, that's all I have left for you guys today. I'll see you guys next time.